actually, you were quoted recently in a Medium article that's saying, from what I see on social media, a lot of white progressives, folks who are doing a great job marching with my brothers and sisters of color, are having some really bad conversations with their more conservative white friends and family. So, in terms of the do's and don'ts in talking about race, what are some of, let's get to some of those don'ts that people should be aware of that you feel like you've seen patterns, they happen
Oh
frequently.
my gosh. Yeah. Oh, and people tell me about essentially how mean they are to people in their family. I'm like, stop being so mean to your cousin. Like that's not helping, right?
Why so
So
angry?
yeah. So one of the things that's important to do is to make a distinction between anger at the problem of racism and anger at people who reflect the problem of racism. That distinction is important. So I want people protesting, marching, non-violently, being angry, right? Being angry about the problem, no problem. That's energizing. It mobilizes you, mobilizes other people. But don't be angry at your cousin, because when you're talking to your cousin and you're trying to pull your cousin in to understanding that racism is a real thing we need to think about, your anger is not only non-productive, it's actually counterproductive. So one of the things is don't get angry. Now, a version of that, a loftier word for that is show compassion. Show compassion for people that you're trying to invite to a new understanding. So that's a critical thing. The second thing is humility. Part of what people do is they try to persuade people about racial issues. Their stance is like, racism is a problem out there. It's a problem within you. I'm good though, right? And that's not very inviting. And so the people need to come from a different place, and to come from a place of, I notice sometimes that I have racist thoughts, and it looks like there's racism in society. I'm not the only person. Do you ever have those? Like, that's a much more inviting way of approaching it. I'd say that our motto for this project is confession, concession, and compassion, right? Because, and I'll tell you about the concession part too. Part of what you want to do when you're trying to have a conversation with somebody is to follow the ABC rule: agreement before challenges. So you want to find ways, if you're talking to somebody, find ways to agree with them before you try to challenge. So that means making strategic concessions in the conversation. So you're not trying to go at them with like, you're just wrong. As I have said, people do not like to be corrected, but they don't mind learning. So your strategy, the mistake that people make, is to be all about the correction energy as opposed to the invitation energy. And so to do that requires being calm and requires strategically looking at the conversation and not be all about like, I'm going to make you different now, but it's you're inviting the person as opposed to just correcting them. So stop getting so mad. Like, calm down, stop getting so mad. Recognize that even if you're further down the road of racial understanding than they are, you ain't been woke yourself forever, right? So you could be them too. So have some compassion, and then try to find, in the course of the conversation, before you try to move them forward, try to find some way you connect or agree with them. And people often don't want to do that. They're so agitated and they're so about changing them that they don't even want to look for, how can I connect with this person? So those are some of the common pitfalls.
One of the things you mentioned to me in the past that I thought was really powerful was this notion of just not dismissing somebody's concerns out of hand, or go there with me, because I think that seems like that builds a bridge more than just about anything in that situation.
Yeah, part of what happens is that people take the stance of everything the person says in their battery of beliefs that are include their which we decide is their racially problematic views, that everything is wrong, and I'm going to teach them that everything they think of is wrong. So and that is the precise opposite thing you need to do if you're trying to persuade them. So for just as an easy example, although it has its own complexity, like take affirmative action, right? Now, I think affirmative action is is a good thing based on, like, if you look at the racial inequities all across the board, right? From education to income to housing, you look at all of these inequities, and you look at even aggressive affirmative action programs don't include that many people like that. So let's face that. So I think that they're good things. Now, could it be possible that one could overdo that? Is it possible that one could overdo that? It's certainly possible to do that. But if you're arguing with somebody who thinks affirmative action is wrong, and they talk about like the way that it could happen that unqualified people get jobs over people who are qualified, you're better off acknowledging that that's at least a reasonable concern in theory, as opposed to focusing on how that could never happen. Basically, that's wrong, right? Even if in the real world it doesn't happen. So I'm just saying that being dismissive of somebody, it not only is a problem, like it is a problem rhetorically from an argument standpoint, but it also, when people feel dismissed, they don't want to concede to you. They don't want to see your point, right? So, and part of what we know is that the best way to get somebody to listen to you is to listen to them first. So, I mean, there's good research on that. And so if we want to be persuasive, you want to ask questions and listen to somebody's concerns and not dismiss them.
Okay. Well, that leads us, bridges very nicely into the do's, what to do. And you've written several books on this, obviously, David. So when it comes to conversations on race, that's a big bulk of the output. How about the do's? How do we talk about these issues effectively? And let's go there.
Sure. So in my project, I teach something called the RACE method of managing a conversation. And it's the RACE stands for reflect, ask, connect, expand. And it stands for the phases of a conversation. Sometimes they happen right in order. Sometimes you have to loop back. But if you do it in order, it goes like this. Our RACE is for reflect. And that basically means find a way to calm down, like find a way to relax yourself in when you know you're in this conversation, you know your emotions are about to get up, about to rage up because it has emotional salience for you. You hopefully have done some work in advance to figure out what I need to do to calm down, and then you actually do it in the moment. So some people imagine their happiest place. Some people, I've got a lot of good feedback on this one. Some people put the tongue on the roof of their mouth. Why? Because you can't talk with their tongue in your mouth, right? So people do that. But you need to find whatever it is for you so you can calm down. So that's step one. Step two, after you calm down, you want to ask questions. You want to get, as somebody said, get curious, not furious. What you want to do is to ask questions that are focused on probing the beliefs, but in particular, you want to try to get beneath the belief to the experience related to the belief, because you're going to have a more connecting conversation if you have a experience-based conversation, not a belief-based conversation. Okay, so reflect, ask, and ask questions to get to an experience related to their belief that you disagree with. Then connect. This is the concession part. This is where you try to find something that you can agree with in what they said. Even if you can't agree with the part that is that you look as the racist part, you can find something else that you do agree with that's related to the topic. So you're trying to show them, I don't think you're completely crazy. So reflect, ask, connect, and then expand. Here is where you offer a story. Oh, by the way, I should say the connect, you should do through a story. Like once you figure out what the thing is you want to connect on, you tell a story about it. So they've told you a story and then you tell them a story. And telling stories taps into a part of our brain that we feel more connected to other people. There's something called mirror neurons that help us when we're, the reason why we cry at movies or get mad at when other people tell us a story about something happened to them is because there's a part of our brain that links up with people and tries to mimic what we think their brain is doing. So that best happens to a story. So you connect through a story and then you try to expand through a story. You try to make your point that you think racism is real by telling a story about it. And the best type of story, the most powerful type of evidence is one that shows that you have racially problematic thoughts, and then you can connect that to racism in society. But the most powerful type of story is one in which you show that you had problems, you had racially problematic thoughts, if you're trying to convince somebody that racism is real?
Since we spoke first, I guess a couple of years ago, I've actually tried out the race method on friends and acquaintances, and
How'd it work, brother?
The most important nugget there was don't expect to change the world in one conversation, which you share with me as well. And one little step forward is a step forward. So I had a couple of steps forward, and appreciate that. I was curious to get your take on, I'm having taught this method, the race method, to thousands of folks. What do you find in those workshops, online and in person, is the most challenging of those 4 steps? We're gonna enact out a little dialogue in just a minute to give listeners a sense of how this works in real time. But before we do, I wanted you to speak to what are the challenging ones of that process that you've seen over the years?
Right. I think that the biggest difficulty is, again, just to be clear, the White Ally Toolkit, whiteallytoolkit.com, the biggest challenge for white folks who want to make a difference on racism by being more persuasive, which is what we focus on. The biggest is deciding that those little moments of where you had racially problematic thoughts are something that I can look at and then share with other people. So that confession part, that's why it's confession, concession, compassion. That's why confession is first. And I'm not the only person saying that. Like Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, the guy that wrote Stand from the Beginning, How to Be Anti-Racist, he says the heart of racism is denial and the heart of anti-racism is confession, right? So I'm not the only one saying this. So the biggest challenge, I mean, all the steps are challenging for different reasons, but the biggest one is saying, I noticed the last week when I was when some black guy passed me in the parking lot, walked by in the parking lot, I locked my door. Or I noticed that when I go to a hotel, I wonder whether the black person was here last. Or I mean, go down a list, right? So the point is that we are all subject to racially problematic thoughts. One could call it white superiority thinking. That includes me, right? We're all subject to white superiority thinking. But because we have positioned racism to be such a social faux pas of the capital crime order, as opposed to what it needs to be, which is more like a second-degree misdemeanor, which I think is because it's a capital crime, we can't admit it. And so we can't admit it to ourselves or admit it to other people. But that is the precise opposite of what needs to happen if we're going to move forward. Because like I said before, if we're going to get people who think racism is not real in society, we have to show them that it's real within us and we can be good people and still have these problematic thoughts. But so if we're not willing to do that, then we're pointing at them and we're asking them to change the narrative about society, and they're not likely to do that, as opposed to, like I said before, hashtag we all have the virus. So I have it. It seems like other people have it. Do you have it? It's a whole different way. So I think that changing your narrative about that is vital. And it's important to upset the racist, non-racist binary, like you either racist and bad or non-racist is good. And instead that binary is not helping us. Instead, we all have the problem. It's just, some of us are more asymptomatic than others.
Okay.